Hi, this is Julie with a few things I want to share before we begin. This is the 100th episode of the Mother's Quest podcast. It feels fitting to mark this occasion with a powerful conversation about revolutionary love with renowned civil rights leader Valarie Kaur. Valarie talks about revolutionary love as sweet labor. And this podcast, since I launched it 7 years ago in 2016, has always been a labor of love. So too has been my form of mission-aligned sponsorship, where rather than seeking corporate sponsors, I invite one mother to dedicate each episode and to make a contribution to support Mother's Quest. In honor of this milestone, I invited Shelley Tegelski, founder of Pandemic of Love and an advisory board member of Global Empowerment Mission, to dedicate. Instead of contributing to Mother's Quest, I made a contribution to the Global Empowerment Mission. I hope you'll join me in celebrating this 100th episode milestone by sharing this important conversation you're about to hear and by making a donation to the Global Empowerment Mission linked in the show notes. Thank you for listening and for being a witness on my journey to find my own voice and to amplify the voices of other incredible mothers like Valarie and Shelley, who help light the way for all of us. Here is Shelley with this episode's dedication, followed by some moments of silence.
Hi, I'm Shelley Tegelski, and I'd like to dedicate this episode of the Mother's Quest podcast to all the mothers of young, innocent children who are caught in the crossfire of war. May these children grow up in a world that is free from hate and injustice. May they be free from suffering. May they have access to opportunities and never be devoid of hopes and dreams. As the founder of Pandemic of Love and an advisory board member of Global Empowerment Mission, we are currently providing aid to Israelis and to Palestinians. When people ask us to choose a side, we say, we have. We are on the side of love, or as Valarie Kaur says it best, revolutionary love. So to learn more about how you can support our efforts, please visit globalempowermentmission.org.
Hi, and welcome to Mother's Quest, a podcast for moms like me ready to live our own truly epic life. I'm Julie Neal, a life and leadership coach, community builder, writer, and mom to two high-energy boys who challenge me to grow into my best self. I'll be right there. Where was I? This September 11th, 2023, I had the honor of holding space for an intimate conversation with civil rights leader, lawyer, award-winning filmmaker, educator, and best-selling author of the incredible book, See No Stranger, Valarie Kaur. The fact that we were recording on September 11th was meaningful because the tragic event that had taken place 22 years ago shaped Valarie in profound ways and set her on a path that she never expected. Valarie became an activist after a man of the same Sikh faith, a father and family friend she called uncle, was the first person murdered in hate violence in the aftermath of 9/11. For 2 decades in his memory, Valarie led visionary campaigns to tell untold stories and change policy on issues ranging from hate crimes to solitary confinement to digital freedom. Along the way, she earned degrees at Stanford University, Harvard Divinity School, and Yale Law School. Today, Valarie is the mother of 2 children, and as you'll hear her share, the experience of becoming a mother inspired her to birth the Revolutionary Love Project, which supports communities with practical tools to transform the nation from the inside out. Revolutionary love, Valarie says, is the choice to labor for others, for opponents, and for ourselves. Love is sweet labor, fierce, bloody, imperfect, life-giving, a choice we make. And it begins with wonder. You can look at someone and say, "You are a part of me I don't yet know." From there, we begin to transform the world around us and inside us. There is a lightness and hopefulness in the tone of our conversation that we wouldn't have in the same way if we recorded the conversation today. I am grateful for it. Valarie thanked me at the end for giving her the deepest breath she had had in a long time. During a time in our country and world where so many seem to be disconnected from our sense of our common humanity and divisions between us are widening, I hope this conversation is a deep breath for you. Because as Valarie says, as she evokes the metaphor of a midwife from her famous watch night speech linked in the show notes, we must first breathe and then we push. The mother asks, what if this darkness we face is not the darkness of the tomb, but the darkness of the womb? Today we breathe, and tomorrow we will labor in revolutionary love. I'm Julie Neal, and this is Mother's Quest. Valarie, welcome to the Mother's Quest podcast. It is such an honor to be able to have this conversation with you today. I've been immersing myself in all of your words and your metaphors, your book and your TED Talk, and it's all so beautiful. And I just can't imagine also a better time to have this conversation than today on 9/11, which has been such a pivotal date in your quest and at the beginning of the school year. So I'm trusting that we're going to have an amazing conversation.
Thank you so much. I'm so glad to be here with you.
So I want to start with the question I ask every guest. Tell me a little bit about your own mother and the impact that she had in shaping who you are today.
Oh, I can just feel my heart softening as you're asking me this. I see her. My mother is an extension of me. I don't know where I end and she begins. I think we have a very rare relationship. She was only 20 years older than me. And so oftentimes when we're talking, I would say, remember when we were little? we did so much of our growing up together in a way. So we're very close. We're very tethered to each other, even now. And of course, that comes with a shadow, right? Because my first memory of my mother, and she's so incredibly beautiful, just like even now, she's 60 something, just so deeply beautiful, large, luminous eyes, that beauty mark on her chin, like the black hair, just the gorgeous, radiant smile, and inside out. This is someone who loves beauty, who immerses herself in music and song and dance, and who laughs with her whole body. And my first memory of her as a child is of her crying, just sitting on the bed and the tears coming down. And, she had an arranged marriage when she was 18 and went from growing up in Punjab, India, to coming to the United States and becoming part of this family where my father was so devoted and sincere and beautiful, but was still learning how to be a husband. And so they were really under the thumb of my grandmother, who was the matriarch of the family, and made my mother's life very, very difficult for a very long time. And so I remember being a fixer before I could speak. I would be the one communicating my mother's pain to my father, trying to build bridges of peace between her and them and my mother-in-law. No, my grandmother. I mean, that's how merged we were, right? And so the shadow part of that is that I don't think I got some of the, I would say, the wise woman mothering. It's almost like my mother and I had to both find the wise women inside of ourselves as we grew up. And now when my daughter was born, I was the same age that my mother was when she sent me off to college. And so now here I have a 4-year-old, but both my mother and I have learned so much together that we are mothering her in a very new way that keeps the love and the intimacy that we had, but does it, I think, with a lot more hard-earned wisdom.
So beautiful. And you referenced the wise woman, and I've been reading your book and I did a meditation on your site. So I know that this idea of this part of ourselves that is loving and knowing and has life experience and can quiet our inner critic is such a foundational thought, and really like a process that you go through in your life. So I'm hoping we can circle back to that. I wanted to ask you, related to your incredible relationship with your mother, if you would tell the story about the birth of your son with your mother at your side and what you feel like that has taught you about what it means to be a mother.
Oh, I'm just smiling so wide. I didn't know what birthing labor was going to be like. No one really knows, but I feel like I especially didn't know. I had these notions. I wrote out my birthing plan. There will be dim lights and this music and just so. And of course, it was so rupturous and thunderous and rapid. And by the time I was in transition, it just felt like I was dying. I thought I couldn't go on. It felt like there was a ring of fire that opened up from under me. And the only way was to go through the fire. I forgot that the whole process I was in had anything to do with the baby in the first place, So I was unmedicated. And by the time I wanted medication, it was too late. I mean, it was just,
oh my goodness.
I was in it. And my mother had her hand, my husband was by my side holding my hand, but my mother had her hand on my forehead and she was stroking my hair and she was saying, "You are brave. You are brave." And I just kept saying, "I can't. You are brave. You are brave." And in that moment, I saw my mother's mother behind her and her mother behind her and her mother behind her. And this long line of women who had pushed through the fire before me. And it's like, I can't do this alone, but I could do it with them by my side. Like I took a deep breath and it was like an ancestral breath. It was like the breath of all the women who came before to infinity. And with that breath, then I pushed and could feel my son's body and then one more push and then his head. And then before I knew it, that's how he was born.
I've had the first of what I know will be many tears that I'm aware of as I hear you share these stories, which are just so powerful. And what I'm thinking about is the fact that I ended up with 2 C-sections. And so I can't personally relate to the physical birthing experience that you've had, but my experience of being a mother, which can feel like needing to push through a ring of fire, depending on what the circumstances, often. And just that knowing of being able to have support and to be able to lean on. In my case, my mother has also been just an unbelievable foundation in my life. I also have 2 sisters. But that way in which many people can mother as a verb and care for us as we move through one of the hardest things in the world, which is bringing children into this world in whatever way we do it and helping to raise them and learning how to both let go and be their foundation when they need it. It's one of the most challenging things imaginable. And it's so wonderful that we don't have to be alone in it.
I keep thinking we don't go to battle alone. We don't give birth alone. We need our midwives in whatever form by our side. And that's true for any labor that we're undertaking. And I just want to say before I go on that there is no right way to give birth. It is miraculous and difficult and courageous, no matter how the baby comes out of us. The second child came around. I was like, just get the baby out of me. That's my birth plan. It is the most profound transitions in life, birthing, dying. We must do it in community. And that's true for all the labors in between, that we need people by our side as we're breathing and pushing, whether it's the labor of raising a family or making a life or building a movement or rebirthing a nation. Who are we breathing with? How are we breathing? And what is the push we are making? How are we pushing? And I have to say, I've been an activist my whole life, but after I became a mama, the same atrocities would just sear me. Like I became like a raw nerve. The same kind of mass shooting I would show up at and grieve with people and organize with people. I could barely hold myself together because all I could think about were my own children. And what if they were in the coffins and what world will they inherit? And how will we make it safe for them? I would put my son to bed and then just feel the breath out of my body, right? And that's when you know that you need your ancestors at your back, right? Who are the foremothers and the forefathers? Who are the elders who have gone through atrocities long before us? What wisdom can we glean from them? What kind of courage? How can we show up with them at our backs? And so every time I convene people together these days, I ask them to bring forth an ancestor who makes them brave. And it doesn't need to be someone who is in your family line. I know some people have a hard time, what their lineage is. But if all of humanity is kin, then all of the ancestors are available to us. And if we recall them with integrity, they all have something to teach us. And so whether it's a historical figure or a spiritual figure or beloved grandparent, it's like I encourage us to build out our internal life so that we have these resources within us to call upon when we need it. Because this moment, we are all in transition. The nation is in transition, right? Within the next 25 years, the number of people of color in the United States will exceed the number of white people for the first time since colonization. And we are at a crossroads, right? Like, it feels like there are people who are resisting that future. And so the contractions are coming so fast, like the crises are coming so fast, but there's barely time to breathe between them. And it feels like dying. It feels like civil war. It feels like it could be the end of our democracy as authoritarian forces gain ground. And yet transition is exactly the stage that precedes new life. It's like, can we stand in the grief and the pain of what we're enduring and have the audacity to imagine what is wanting to be born? The America that we dream? One where all of our children belong, where I see yours as mine and you see mine as yours. Like, can we labor for that America? And I do feel like now more than ever, anytime people who have no obvious reason to love one another are coming together in the face of pandemic and political violence and climate disasters and everything else we're facing, when we come together to grieve, to care for each other, to nurture each other, to organize, to lift our gaze, to hope together, to rise together. I mean, those are glimpses of the America that wants to be.
I've been so just completely enraptured by your metaphors, and this one around birthing and the darkness and the transition that happens just before new life is so profound. And I also love metaphors. So what has become the metaphor for me with Mother's Quest is this idea of living an epic life, saying yes to our heroine's journey. I had a challenging motherhood journey, I would say. About a decade in, I looked up and felt like I had in some ways been swallowed whole by motherhood. I absolutely found myself and loved being a mother more than anything. But my oldest was diagnosed with autism at 18 months. And so at a very early age, my motherhood journey was defined by trying to figure out how to advocate for him and how to help him to thrive in a world that was not designed for him. And then when I decided to have my second child, I had over 6 years of infertility. And so I came to this moment, like a choice moment, where I felt like I needed to put a stake in the ground and say, yes, I can be a present mother for my children. And I'm also here to make an impact beyond them and to live the fullest expression of my own life and become the person who I'm meant to be. And so Mother's Quest was born. In 2016, I actually had a spiritual experience with two birds that got trapped in my house, and the opening of the door for those birds became a metaphor. And ever since, I've been on my own quest to figure out, how can I make an impact and how can I build community among other mothers and create space for conversations like the one that you and I are having today. And I truly believe that mothers are part of the hope and the key to birthing the nation that you speak so eloquently about, that we might have the audacity to dream about. So I want to ask you about what you're on a quest for, what you think your heroine's journey has been. And then EPIC, in addition to the larger metaphor, is also an acronym mnemonic for the guideposts that I think help us to live that life. So after you tell me a little bit about the big picture quest you're on, I would love to delve into each guidepost and get some wisdom from you about how these guideposts show up for you.
That's so beautiful. I just want to honor the story you just shared with me in this space that you've created. So much of mothering can feel so isolating, and the narratives of not enough and the mama guilt and the confusion of how to navigate and be. And I think it's because all of us who are mothering right now, mothering is a verb, whatever body we occupy with, all of us who are mothering right now are doing it in such an unprecedented time when we have more freedoms and opportunities that our previous generations have fought for, and it's never felt more breathless. And so how to show up and mother our babies as we're mothering the world is the quest I'm on. That's it.
Wow. As I was reading your book, I had this question in my mind about what might have been a spark moment for you in setting on your path on this quest to mother a new and better world. Would you be open to sharing what that might be? And sometimes we have multiple moments along the way, but if you had to identify one that you think really set you on your path, what would it be?
Well, we're having this conversation on September 11th. 22 years ago today, I was a kid in college and just feeling shattered by watching the towers fall again and again on the screen and trying to wrap mind around all of that incomprehensible grief. When there was a face that flashed on the screen, and the next thought I had was, our nation's new enemy looks like my grandfather. In the Sikh faith, the men and boys in our community wear turbans, and one of the Sikh practices is to keep one's hair long. And so staring at the bearded and turban man on the screen, I immediately went to my cousins, my grandfathers, my people, my community. And it was just minutes later that our inboxes started to explode with voices crying out, they chased my brother, our Gurdwara's on fire, my sister's been stabbed, someone's going to die, someone's going to die. And then on September 15th, Balbir uncle was killed, Sikh American father standing in front of his gas station in Mesa, Arizona, planting flowers. He was killed by someone who called himself a patriot. I never set out to be an activist. It was never a choice. It was like my country was on fire, and then my people, my family were under attack. Sikh Americans were at the forefront of so much of the hate violence that bore down on people of color in the weeks and months and years after 9/11. And that hate violence never went back down. Even today, 20 some years later, the numbers are just as high as they were in the aftermath of 9/11. And we've had hate violence followed by state violence, all the policies that denigrated Muslim, Arab, and South Asian American communities, and the wars on terror that have cost so many thousands of lives and so much destruction. And so it was really that moment. I didn't know everything that was to follow, but I did know that I had to do something. And it was like anything. And I had this old camera, and I got in my car and started to drive across the country, going from home to home, from city to city, from door to door, sitting with people who had just survived incredible violence, sometimes when the blood was still fresh on the ground, and I would capture their stories. And I went to Mesa, where Balbir uncle was killed, and sat with his family and captured their stories. And it was like every story just spread this like cancerous despair through my body. And I knew that there was one last, I was so young. There was one, I had no tools really to think about trauma or vicarious trauma. All I knew was that I was just being filled with darkness. And I had one last interview to do. I had to go travel halfway around the world to meet Balbir uncle's widow, who was living in Punjab when he was killed. And we traveled through those fields and through those fields, past these homes and villages. And there she was, a silhouette in front of the door. She was wearing all white, the color of mourning. There were dark circles under her eyes. And I could only, I looked at my list of questions and I just crumpled them up. And I just wept with her. I just cried with her. And I said, Auntie G, what would you like to tell the people of America? And it was kind of like a blunt, leading question. Like I wanted her to voice my own despair and anger. And she said, thank you. Tell them thank you. When I went to America for my husband's memorial, they came out in the thousands, 3,000 people, Christian, Muslim, Jew. They didn't know me, and yet they wept with me. They loved me. Tell them thank you for their love. That's the spark moment.
Yeah.
That's the moment I think that changed my life. That's the moment, because it was like that love saved this widow's heart, and in turn, she saved mine. And I thought, oh, the people, like the country didn't know Balbir Uncle's story, but all the people showed up in Mesa because the local community told the story of a man who would hand out candy to the children who came to his gas station because he saw all children as his children, like a man who would always bow his head, even when he passed a Christian church, and his father would be like, why, Father, why are you bowing? He's like, oh, the divine is everywhere. Like a man who really lived a life of love and service. Like, I don't think we need to be superhuman to be mourned in death. And that's true for so many of us as people of color. And Balbir Uncle was really an exceptional human being who lived a life of love. Like he lived the Sikh faith's call to oneness and love, this call to see no stranger. And the local community told that story. And that's why people showed up. And I thought, oh, storytelling can change hearts and minds. Storytelling can bring out the courage we didn't think we had. Storytelling can make you see my uncle not as a terrorist, but as a brother. And I tell the story. And Julie, that began my life of like filmmaking and lawyering and organizing with every film, with every campaign, with every lawsuit. I thought we were making the nation safer. And then my kids are born and it's not safer and white supremacist rage is rising. And I had to go back and remember what I once learned, which is that, yes, we need policy change. We need sound government. We need all those things. But the only way we last in the face of this much injustice is if we are showing up with love.
It's so interesting hearing you share this story, and read it in your book too. But the obvious answer I thought you would say would be that 9/11 is what brought you on the path. But almost like the leading question that you asked the woman who was grieving, the real answer was it was the love that showed up that she reflected to you. That was your spark moment.
Though I didn't realize it until just now as I was saying it out loud. I was like, oh, that was the moment. Because I spent 20 years of my life organizing around hate. I've made a promise to spend the rest of my life organizing around love. That's why I believe revolutionary love is the call of our times. And if we can teach each other and inspire each other to love one another, to show up with love, even in the face of our opponents, love ourselves as a way of making change, as a way of showing up in the world. That's like the long-term shift in culture and consciousness that I think will actually get us across this transition. That's how we birth the America we dream. It's block by block, heart to heart work. And each of us has a role in that.
So speaking of spark moments, as I was reading your book, I started to ask myself this question. I wonder what it was for you that shifted from the 20 years, as you said, where you were in a place of resistance to the birth of what you now call revolutionary love. And then almost as soon as I asked the question, the pages unfolded for me and answered it. And I think it relates to the first epic guidepost. So we'll start there. And if you can weave in this curiosity to your answer, that would be great. E is about engaging mindfully with our children. Tell me about how you engage mindfully with your children and how your own mothering shifted how you do the work that you do today.
I just have to laugh because even having this conversation, right, I was trying to put markers and paper into my daughter's hand and say, I can't mother you right now because I have to talk about mothering, but that's a way of mothering, but I'm kind of present to you, but not really, but I am because it's all about you anyway. It's, I feel like it's really, to be honest, like it's so hard to mother every day mindfully. Your mind is always rushing forward into the next thing you have to do. As soon as we're done, like, what are they going to eat for dinner? It's just one thing after another. And oftentimes we're just so, even when we're present, we're just so tired that we can't behold the magic and wonder that's in front of us. And then the next thing we know, they're 4. That's kind of why I've been so emotional this week at the start of a new semester. And so I do think the moments, the solace I take is that when I'm talking to my sisters who are in the similar mothering, it's like, oh, we all feel that way. Oh, great. We're exhausted all the time. We always feel like we're not enough. Okay. So then maybe those few moments when we are able to drop in and look at the face in front of us and wonder about them and think like, all of our, maybe that is enough. It was my mother who taught me that love is more than a rush of emotion. You know, like love is sweet labor. It's fierce and bloody and imperfect and life-giving. And it's a choice that you make again and again and again. And the root of love is wonder. If my daughter starts crying, I should just walk into the room. If she starts crying in a moment, you know, empathy, just sitting and feeling what she's feeling is not going to do very much for her. I mean, there's a role in empathy and love, but that comes later. Like the first thing I need to do is wonder, like, what does she need? How do I care for her? Who is she now? How is she expressing herself? How is she? To wonder about her, the beginning of learning how to love her. And that's true for beyond our circle of our closest relationships. It's true for my husband. You know, the moment I stop wondering about him is the moment our marriage starts to die a little bit. And that's why those dinner vacations, we call them dinner vacations instead of date nights. I don't know why. I just feel a little elevated, but they're still just date nights. That's why like those nights together are so important. 90 minutes, watch Winnie the Pooh kids so we can sit and talk, look at each other and wonder about each other and hear each other so we can like nourish the root of our relationship again. And so it's true for your friendships, for your family relationships, for your children. And it's also true beyond, like those people who showed up to the memorial, they had to want to wonder about Balbir Uncle's story, want to wonder about this widow and her broken heart, to be able to show up and grieve with her. Like wondering about each other is such a revolutionary practice in a society that wants to shut down our imagination, our ability to look at each other's faces and say, you are a part of me I do not yet know.
That's one of the most beautiful things that you weave through everything that you share. And even though I've been reading about wonder and its importance, I had not yet thought about it in the context of how we look at our kids.
Oh,
so well, thank you for that.
It's the easiest one because it's the hardest because we're tired, but it's the most available to us because they are changing all the time. They're changing so fast. They're changing every day. And it's hard to keep up. You know, if there are moments, if you wake up and go to sleep with wonder, in the morning, my children and I, we developed a practice during the pandemic when we didn't know what the next day was going to hold. So we woke up and said, I get to be alive. I get to be alive today. I get to be alive today with you.
Oh, that is
and
so
that
sweet.
You, right? It was like, who are you? Can I wonder about you today? Can I get to wonder about you today? And then before we go to sleep too, you know, to recap the day and then to say, you know, what was the thorn of the day and what was the rose and what is the bud? What is the thing you're looking forward to? And to end it with a little bit of wondering together is, I think it's enough for a mama to carry everything that she's doing. You just build in 2, maybe 3 moments in a day like that. Oh, then your children, you're just nourishing them. You're giving them the attention they need.
I love that. I'm smiling. I want to move us into the next guidepost P, which stands for passionate and purposeful. And this is about the impact that you're making in the world beyond motherhood. Tell me a little bit about how becoming a mother brought you to this idea of revolutionary love, and how is this work unfolding for you today?
You know, we started by talking about my mother, and as beautifully as she nurtured me and cared for me and set me free, I grew up with this notion that I wasn't supposed to be like her. Like that she was sacrificing so that I could live the life that she was denied. In Indian tradition, when a daughter gets married, there's a final ceremony called the doli, where you say goodbye to your family and you go live with your husband's family. And it is the most mournful moment ever. Like it feels like someone has died. People are singing songs. Like it just, even the distant relatives are crying because it's such a devastating departure. And that was the day that I left for college. We went to each room of the house and we cried. And my mother she's like, I'm marrying you to the world. Like she set me free. She set me free to live this, like to have a public voice, to live a life as a scholar, as an activist, to everything. And so my departure, like the moment I left that house, I thought I was supposed to be something entirely different and new. And then And so I was in the trenches at the site of the mass shootings. I was in America's supermax prisons. I was at Guantanamo. I struggled with people of color in the face of so much injustice. And it just seemed to get worse and worse and worse. And when my babies were born, it was like I looked at my mother with new eyes for the first time. Oh, you're a warrior. And you have been laboring for me from my birth to my baby's birth. You know that love is sweet labor. And to labor like that, to show up like that every day with courage, with empathy, with compassion, with wonder, with dedication, without expectation of anything in return, to set others free. That's what the world is missing. Like, that's the secret ingredient. Like, that's how we birth a new nation and a new world, is we made the kind of love that is confined in our homes a way of being in the world with each other as communities, as a society, as a democracy. And so that's when I said, I'm done with organizing around hate. What if the call of our times is revolutionary love? And then, of course, it's an ancient call, like spiritual traditions from Jesus to Muhammad to Abraham to Guru Nanak. They've all called us to see no stranger, to love others as kin. The question has always been how? How do we put it into practice? And so that's when I went to the rainforest for a year, and I poured through everything I'd ever studied, Divinity School and law school, the neuroscience and the ethics and the psychology and the history. And I started to see patterns of what I now call practices of revolutionary love. And that was the birth of the revolutionary love framework, of the books, Stranger, and now this movement around revolutionary love that is taking hold across the country.
I love how every answer I think is obvious. It's like the next layer, the thing that I'm not articulating this well, but it's so fascinating to me that it was becoming a mother and having your own children that brought you to this new paradigm, but it was of the way it helped you see your mother in new eyes. Really powerful.
Yes, that's it. You're peeling the layers back, and you're doing it, by the way, with my daughter, like a unicorn on her back and climbing on my shoulder. So this is whatever you're doing is really working.
This is, what do they say? This is very meta.
Yes.
Whole conversation. Well, I'm very impressed with your ability to stay so coherent, and not only coherent, but so eloquent. It's so evident to me that you live and breathe these concepts, that you have just integrated it so beautifully into your whole being, your whole life, and your life's work. It's really, I'm going to encourage people, make sure I put links in the show notes to your website, which has all these beautiful tools, including a compass with the practices, but also to get the book, which is the most beautiful blending of memoir and story, but then these powerful concepts that we can integrate into our own thinking and our own lives. So hopefully everybody can go deeper with those resources. And I also want to mention that there's a beautiful podcast episode on the Good Life Project podcast with Jonathan Fields, which I think I've now traced as the introduction that I got to you and your work from years ago.
Oh, wow.
So I'm grateful. Jonathan's podcast inspired mine. And I'll make sure to include a link in the show notes to that conversation too, because you go deep and wide with him on your whole journey.
Thank you.
So this brings us to the next guidepost, I invested in yourself. And this guidepost is about your own self-care, your own growth and learning, the things you do to bring joy into your life. You've already mentioned the rainforest, and I have so much curiosity there. But when you think about how you've invested in yourself and how you continue to do that, what are some of the biggest lessons you've learned about that?
I'm smiling now because I might have had a conversation with my best friend this morning about how am I doing self-care? I'm falling apart again. Right. It's such an ongoing labor. I define revolutionary love as love for others, opponents, and ourselves. It was really the Black feminist Audre Lorde who said, we can learn how to mother ourselves. That is my guidepost right now. It was after my first baby was born, my son was in my arms, and I was playing the piano downstairs. You might hear. No, that's happening now too. And I would hold him as a newborn and say, "You are so brave. You are so smart. You are so brilliant. You are so kind. You are so loving." I mean, he's a newborn. He can't do anything but cry for milk. And my husband looks at me and says, "Why don't you talk to yourself that way?" And I thought he was right. I had a mother who spoke to me that way. I could figure out how to speak to my own babies that way, but I've never spoken to myself that way. And I think there's a voice that's in all of us, and perhaps it's, even more amplified in those of us who were born into bodies that are denigrated in this society. I remember my first racial slur at 6 years old, and how, they call it internalized oppression, but what it feels like is like shame burning in your skin. I wasn't angry at the little boy who called me a black dog. I was ashamed. I was ashamed of being brown and small and helpless in a way. And so I began to talk to myself that way. Like, you're not good enough. You're not smart enough. You're not strong enough. You don't know enough to do that, to say that, to go there. Stay down, keep yourself small. And it wasn't until I became a mama that I started, and my husband said that I had to okay, well, I got to practice. So I got a journal and I would write, okay, wise woman here. Wise woman says, "Oh, my love." She calls me my love. She's very sweet. She said, "Oh, my love." Because that's what I call my babies. "Oh, my love, you are exhausted right now. You just started the first week of school. It's 9/11. All these emotions that you can't name, are bubbling up inside of you. I know you've done all that trauma work and all that healing work, but your body keeps the score and you're still feeling it all. And it's okay. You're going to get on the phone with Julie. You're not going to be perfect. You're just going to be present." She's literally talking to me all day, every day, in the in-between moments.
Yeah.
And loving me into this life so that I could keep breathing and pushing. And it was only 8 years of practicing hearing her voice that I could finally begin to love myself.
You have a part in the book where you talk about a ritual that you created to marry your wise woman self and to silence the inner critic. And it was beautiful, and definitely sparked some thoughts in my own mind about how can I find my own path to doing those two things, quieting that inner voice that is not very loving and amplifying the wise, powerful, the voice that knows that I am enough, that I'll find my way. I think we all have that part of us that I also think is like the person we're becoming, but it can be hard to pay attention to that voice in the midst of the busyness and then the midst of the loud voice of the critic.
Well, I was a bit reckless because I was like, "Oh, I found the wise woman. I am going to burn the little critic. I'm going to drown." I don't know why the fantasies were so violent. I was so tired of having been ruled by the little critic my whole life that I was done with the power struggle between the two. And I wanted the one banished, and finally the wise woman, of course, in all of her maternal wisdom says, "Oh, my love, we need this little guy." I don't know why he was a guy. "We need this little guy. You are a part of me I do not yet know." He was a part of me. He is, the little critic is a part. We have all these parts of ourselves. They just don't have to play the roles that they've been given. And usually they want to be doing something else. I finally wondered about the little critic, and I realized that all this time he was just trying to keep me safe. Because the truth is, he's not wrong. The world is dangerous for women of color who stand up talking about love and justice. The world's going to eat you alive. Yes. And the solution is not silence. It's more solidarity.
Well, that is a beautiful bridge to the last guidepost, C, which stands for connected, to a strong support network, so that we remember that we do not need to be on this journey alone. What have you learned, and where have you found solidarity?
Oh, in sisterhood above all. It was my two Sikh sisters, the two of them coming from the same faith tradition as me. So we had the same internal struggle and ways of talking about our becoming, Niranjan and Dispute. And I talk about them in the back of the book, at the final chapter of the book, but it was the three of us who sat by a pool of water among rocks and said, all right, we're not going to destroy the little critic. We're just going to give him a good retirement and say, you can stick around. You just can't be in charge. You can't sit on the throne. And so that's when I said, why don't we marry the wise woman inside of us? Why don't we make a promise to stay faithful to her for all of our days? So out of the fabric of our tradition, we did a Sikh wedding ceremony, and we made 4 circles, the lava. And up on the 4th circle, I could see her sitting on the throne in my mind, throne of my heart. I wish I could say, and I was enlightened after that. But the truth is, the little critic and all the other parts of ourselves, they come and they derail us and but the practice is to get quiet, in those moments. Just like we have to get quiet and be present to our children throughout the day. It's like, can we get quiet and present to ourselves? Can we wonder about ourselves? Oh, my love, how is your body? What do you need? How can I care for you? How can I love you? And I have been faithful to her enough so that I realize that even on my deathbed, we always say we come into this world alone, we leave alone. Well, I feel like I've carried such a fear of death my whole life. But now when I think about it, there's a part of me that, I want to say looks forward to it, but there's a part of me that knows that, she's like, oh, my love, you won't be alone. I'll be with you. I'll be right there with you, helping you breathe and push to your final transition.
As I'm recording with you, I'm looking at this picture that it's a photo that my best friend gave to me after my dad passed away, which was about 2 years ago. Mm-hmm. And I was with him as he took his last breaths, and my mom was by my side.
Oh.
And I will never see death the same way again. I mean, it was so clear to me that it was as profound an experience as birth, this other ends, like the bookend of everything that happens in between, and this one vessel that is our body. I also never thought about my body the same way again. Just this realization that there's this one body that we have to bring us through all of these experiences. And there will come a time when it won't be able to be the capsule for everything that we're going to experience going forward. So I also, I would love to believe, and I think I do. It's obviously such a great mystery, but I choose to believe that there is something bigger that we connect to afterwards, and that we will find ourselves more connected and not alone.
Well, I think the magic is that love outlasts life. And when I talked about calling our ancestors to us, I think I haven't lost my father. I lost my grandfather, and he was my world. And in moments when I do feel alone, when I maybe even can't even hear the wise woman voice, if I can just feel the texture of his hand in mine and hear his voice, it's like all that love fills my chest, and I can call him to me. Yes, my love.
Oh, that? You see those clothes right there?
Yeah.
Those are my morning clothes. I'm going to wear those to school.
You already chose your morning clothes? Well, that's pretty good.
She's ahead of the curve.
Maybe you can get your morning socks too. No, okay, you don't have to do socks. I was just trying to get this right.
This is, I think, going to be one of my all-time favorite episodes. I mean, there's no way to really share the fullest expression of what Mother's Quest is about than to listen to this guy. Well, this brings us close to the end. I always end with acknowledgements. There's also a moment for you to give me and anyone listening an invitation or a challenge that can help us more fully live our epic life. But before we get to that, I love to ask people, and reflect on this myself, about what I call epic snapshot moments. And so I'd love to know, what is one epic snapshot moment that stands out for you, maybe more recently in your life, where you feel like all of these aspects of who you are that we've been talking about and living an epic life came together, and you felt like, yes, this is what it is. This is what I have been striving for. It's a moment that you almost would like to bottle up to help you get through all the hard times. What's an example of something that's standing out for you?
Exactly a year ago this week, I was invited to the White House and honored by the president for my work. And that ceremony, it was the Uniter ceremony. It was followed by a speech that he gave to the country where he named white nationalist rage as a national priority. And he said Balbir Uncle's name and he told his story. And it was like, 20 some years of toiling in the dark. And now his name, his story is part of national memory. And it wasn't all for nothing. And yes, things are bad, but we're not alone anymore. Look at this room, look at this space, like the movement we're building. So I was going to start there, and I guess I did, but the real deep answer right now.
Because every answer today has two. It's like the top layer and the deeper layer.
I nursed my daughter up until March of this year. I nursed her a really long time because it was pandemic and the doctor said she would get vaccine protection to the milk, and people have all different kinds of relationship with nursing, just like there's no right or wrong, right? I just want to say that at the beginning. For me and my daughter, the nursing was really beautiful and important. And I was tired a lot. There was this one moment a few months ago where I woke up and was nursing her. And usually my mind would just jump to all the things like, I'm going to pull off her pull up and how will I get her to brush her teeth and put on the dress, but not the dress, but and get her all of those things. But for some reason, maybe it was the way the light was coming into the room, or maybe, I just looked down and she was looking up at me with that one eye, and my body was turning blood into milk that was going into her body, that was turning it back into blood. And I couldn't figure out where I ended and she began. You are a part of me I do not yet know. It was this moment where we were all just skin and sunlight and oneness.
So
I want to taste
beautiful.
that. I want to keep tasting that while I have a body, while I'm on this earth. And it goes back to what you were saying earlier about your father. Believe that our oneness is the deepest truth there is, that we're part of each other, that separateness is an illusion. From you to me, all the way up to the stars, like that is the only truth there is. And when we die, we become part of the oneness that always is. And while we have this life, while we are on this earth to sing a song of love, to love with all of our being, I don't know what could make a more meaningful life.
Ooh, so moving from that beautiful reflection, would you invite me and anyone else who wants to say yes to read or do or reflect on that will help us live that kind of life that you're speaking about?
Ants on a leaf, birds in the sky, sweet little bee, tree so high. Wonder baby says, wow, whoa, you're a part of me I don't yet know. People walk by, faces are new, so many colors, points of view. Where have they been? What have they seen? Their stories show me everything. Wonder baby says, wow, whoa, you're a part of me I don't yet know. Sad stories make me turn away, but I keep listening, I get brave. I speak, I march, I dance, I sing. Justice is what we can bring. Wonder baby says, wow, whoa, you're a part of me I don't yet know.
Okay, well, that is an epic snapshot moment in my life. Valarie Kaur singing me this beautiful lullaby. Where did this tune and the song come from?
I started singing it to Ananda, to my daughter, on our walks as I was thinking about how to teach her revolutionary love. And I realized I don't need to teach her anything. She already knows how to wonder. I just have to protect and honor what she already knows.
Mm.
And so this song came out, and it will be a picture book that is released next year called World of Wonder, along with a whole learning hub for early childhood educators and parents of 3 to 6 year olds. So I offered it because that refrain, you're a part of me I don't yet know, it's so simple, yet it can change everything.
Well, this brings us to our closing acknowledgments. I need to take a quick breath actually before I go into it, just to try to see if I can integrate all of the wonder and beauty of the things that you've shared with me over this last hour. I want to thank you for your work around revolutionary love, this idea that it is a sweet labor and that motherhood is a sweet labor. And it can be, it can be relentless. Sometimes it can swallow us whole, but it can also be this invitation for so much transformation and so much clarity and so much inspiration to make our world a better place. I also want to acknowledge you for the incredible way that you use words and stories to help us make meaning. I think, whether I was listening to your TED Talk or reading your book in the days preparing, every time I got lost in the words, I found myself either on the verge of tears or crying. And then in this conversation today, I found myself mostly laughing with you. I think that is an amazing gift that you have to be able to express yourself in these ways that helps me and everybody want to be a better person. And finally, I want to thank you for the gift of the word wonder and how much wondering about our children, about our partners, about the people that we see around us that might not look like us, can help us to birth that better world. Thank you.
Oh, Julie, as my daughter runs back into the room, I want to thank you for the deepest breath I've had in a long time.
Can you open up this for me?
Sure. We're going to have a fruit roll up.
We should all have a fruit roll up.
Thank you for the breath you've given me and the breath that you give in this incredible community that you've stewarded. Thank you.
Thank you so much for coming along with me on this episode of the Mother's Quest podcast. I hope this conversation sparked something that will help you live your epic life. If you'd like to get show notes and learn more about how to join the Mother's Quest community, visit mothersquest.com. And while you're there, I would love it if you would follow the prompts to subscribe, leave a review on Apple Podcasts, and help us to spread the word. I want to end with some words to help light the way on your quest. Seize the day, love your people, honor your gifts. Until next time.